Alright, welcome back to Cause 3D. Today, we're going to get ready to paint and prep our jetpack. This is part 3 of our video. If you haven't checked out the other 2, make sure you go back and watch them. So what we're going to start with is we're going to move to the paint booth here in just a minute, and we're going to spray this down with a flat black, and then I'm going to follow it up with sanding and a couple other coats of flat black, and then move over to a clear coat. You can also use gloss black if you want to. However, the problem with gloss black is it does take a lot longer time to cure, and I've found that the flat works better with the gloss over the top of it. So here we go.
He talks about how...
Alright, we've got our black paint on here. We've clear coated everything so that it's nice and glossy, and that's a must if you're going to be doing this silver that we're getting ready to use. So for this project, if you haven't already seen where we did the Mandalorian helmet, I'd recommend going back and watching that video because we get a little more in depth on the process that we use. But from here on out, we're going to go over to the Spazstics Mirror Chrome airbrush, and we're going to follow it up with a couple coats of this, and then we're going to follow it up with an Alclad 2 lacquer, both airbrushed on.
Wasting my days watching the sunset, watching the waves crash all around, and I see you in the clouds. I walk around to clear my head, and I need some time to get it right, and I think...
Alright, we've got our silver on there, we've got our lacquer on there. Now we get to move to one of my favorite parts, which is weathering. So I've got my paint standing by here. We've got our burnt sienna, I've got some umber, some black, I've got a water bottle sitting by, 2 mixing cups, and I love these triangular makeup sponges, especially on a project like this because you can really get into some tight places. So we're going to get started on the weathering. I'm going to start on the rockets for now, just because I want to get a feel for how these paints are going to react with this paint and this lacquer that we've used. All right, so we're just adding on some paint here, and then we're just going to turn around and we're actually going to wipe it right back off. I do this a little more haphazardly. I want this to go down into some of the grooves and the lower spots of where it is. And if you've watched any of my other videos on weathering, I always say the same thing. Less is more. We can always go back and put more on there. So we're just going to go around, wipe it on, wipe it off, and we just want it to get into those cracks. That's all we want it to do at this point. We don't have much on this one up here yet. Let's move down to this lower area here. You're going to want to focus on anywhere where you think something like this would get dirty. Typically, it's in the small cracks and crevices of something like this. So that brown's awfully dark. Just go in there and dab out a little bit of it. And the fun part about this is if you get a little bit extra in different places, it's all right. You can always wipe it off later if need be. So now we got some brown in there. I'm going to move over to the burnt umber. Get a little bit of that going. That's what I love about this makeup brush, or sponge rather. It You can really get down into those deep cracks that we want it in. In some places I might end up using a brush later just to get some of the deeper areas that I can't get with this makeup sponge. It may not show up very well on camera, but boy, that's starting to look good. Starting to get nice and dirty on here. But not too dirty, because the Mando apparently takes care of his armor a little better than Boba used to. Alright, now that we've got these started on the weathering process, I'm not going to go overboard on this project yet. I can always add more later. But this is where we stand right now. Just a light weathering to it. Dulls it up a little bit. Just makes it a little more lived in. Now we're going to move over to the body.
I see you across the room, standing by the door like an angel, hoping you look my way. You look up, I make my way through the crowded room. I start to speak, you pass me by without a sound. I think it's funny how you never come around. I see your fear, why would you ignore me with this madness in your head? I think you've made your point, come across real clear. Story's clear, well, give me a chance, you'll adore me. I know your name, you don't know mine, and I try to speak to you. I wish you'd talk to me, I can see what you're going through. You know them all, but they don't care. None of them know who you are. They act like friends, but they're not. None help you when you fall. I think it's funny how you never come around. I see your fear, but why would you ignore me with this madness in your head? I think you made your point, come across real clear. Story's clear, well, give me a chance, you'll adore me. I see you across the room, looking like an angel. Where you going? And the night fades away.
For the final steps, now that I've got some of my weathering down, I'm going to take a moment and attach my thrusters. As I said before, we want to make sure that these caps are nice and tight up against the cylinder itself, because once you put your thruster on, you don't ever want it to be able to be tightened any further than what it's meant to be. So you don't have to manhandle it, but get it in a good place to be tightened. So I've dropped my guide pin in, put some glue on that, as well as around the top of the thruster here. And we're gonna slide this in, and then I'm gonna make absolutely sure it is lined up with everything nice and straight. I think it looks good. We're gonna let that cure, sit, and then we're gonna move over to the other one. Next, we're gonna affix our center canister in here. I do not want this to come out because we don't want to scratch it with the other cover that goes over the top here. So I'm gonna get that seated where I want it. And then I'm gonna go in from the back and put a couple of drops of glue very carefully along that threaded piece so that it never comes undone. I know you can't see that on camera. Just a few drops into the grooves here at the bottom. You don't have to get too crazy with it. It's not going to go anywhere. We're not going to intentionally be trying to loosen it or anything. And now we'll move on to the front cover. Now do remember that we still have this to be able to be removable, so that if he ever does get a new rocket with our model, we can always put a new rocket on there. And you can also gain access through that hole in there to any electronics that you might want to, if he ends up getting a rocket or something like that, that we might want to run up higher later. Now that we've got that in, the final piece is this right here. Run our glue through there. I'm not going to put any at the top against this because mine does not touch it exactly. There's a slight gap up here. It was designed like that intentionally for the boba rocket, so that you can unscrew this whole thing if you needed to for the boba. But for the Mandalorian, we left that ever so slight gap up here, and it is pretty minuscule. Once this cures, the final thing I'm going to do is do one last minor weathering pass up and around here. Alright, we got our weathering done. We've got everything glued on that needs to be glued on at this point. So the final steps that we have is attaching our parts that go on the top here. I've got a small piece of a metal piano rod that I just have sitting around the shop. It's a little small, but I'm going to epoxy that in there and make sure that it sits down on there real nice. Also, the metal rod itself extends up so that there's less chance of breakage. I've not had one of these break off, but I like to be overcautious. The final thing I'm going to do is the beacon itself. I've got a piece of hollow, I think this was originally a water supply line for a refrigerator, and I've cut off a small piece of that. I'm also going to epoxy that in here and epoxy it into the top of the jetpack. So I'll get started on that. Alright, so we finished up everything. The final thing that I did do off camera that you didn't see was I did add some magnets here in the back for the back cover plate to snap in. And now we've got everything finished. And I may go back and do some tweaking on the weathering. I'm not sure that I'm exactly happy with it yet, but pretty happy overall. So make sure that you like and subscribe. Check out Cause 3D on Etsy if you've purchased one of these. We hope you've been able to build it with us, and send us pictures of it. We'd love to see what people end up doing, even if you've done something custom with it. So like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next video. Thanks.